Hello everyone, and once again welcome from my side and from the whole NIS team side to the X-Road community event of this year. We already entered a little bit into my topic of today's presentation when discussing with Annette about the developments with X-Road and the developments with NIS during the past years. We are going to have plenty of presentations today which go very deep into X-Road itself, which are very close to the X-Road core, very close to X-Road as a software and ecosystem solution. So my presentation today is maybe aimed to give an overview of the developments in Europe and globally and things that are actually impacting all the decisions when we are developing X-Road. When we develop X-Road, we of course have to understand the needs of the current users, but at the same time we also have to understand what kind of new requests for features or needs for data exchange and interoperability are actually waiting just around the corner. And for that purpose, of course, because NIS is based in Europe, our members are Estonia, Finland and Iceland. We typically start from a very European perspective when looking into the questions of how our member governments are willing to exchange data on X-Road and by other means. Maybe some of the developers in the X-Road community can also notice that my presentation cover slide has the technical depth weighting on the left side, which is also one aspect we have to be considering when developing X-Road. X-Road is already getting, well, I wouldn't like to say old, but it's a mature product which has been developed for 20 years. And for X-Road it means that we have an increasing amount of code that we are currently developing by ourselves. And we also have been discussing the possibilities that maybe in the future we could join some of other initiatives in Europe or utilize some common components which might be beneficial for saving time in maintaining some of our own code base. That's also one of the key topics of my presentation, the cooperation in Europe. What we have learned through the years with NIS is that whatever we do is based on cooperation. It means that we cooperate within NIS team, first of all. Next, we cooperate with the X-Road community. We cooperate with NIS member countries and their different organizations, and we cooperate with plenty of organizations in Europe. As well as in EU initiatives, we are cooperating in many of EU Commission-led things as well. And besides that, we also have data spaces emerging. So the field of operations for NIS, it has become actually much broader than it used to be in the beginning, and it is something that we could not avoid by any means. So when I started in 2017, I was surrounded by people who were discussing how do we solve interoperability locally? How our national government, regional government, or any other organization facilitating data exchange is going to use something like X-Road, or to deploy X-Road, or to invent something of their own. And this discussion has been changing all the time. To illustrate this question, we have a few trends behind it. So the digitalization in Europe, all around Europe and also globally, is increasing the needs and the demand for national and cross-border data transfer, also interoperability of different means. And this increasing need is going in multiple tracks. It's not only so that one country is deciding what they do, but we have countries, we have municipalities, we have federal states, cities, all of these organizations having their own digitalization agenda. And the question is how we make it work together. The data should be available nationally, but it also should be available in the European context, Europe-wide or EU-wide in public and private sectors. Quite often, different initiatives are led by the public sector, but actually the need to involve private sector is higher than ever before. And besides the needs of the public sector and the private sector, we also see the needs of people, the needs of citizens. How we have to make sure that everyone can feel their data is well secured. Everyone should have the rights to control their data, and we should provide tools and mechanisms to allow good control over that. When we talk about the national initiatives, which also could be described as regional or local data exchange initiatives, we typically talk about something like X-Road. It could be X-Road or any other ecosystem solution, or it could be infrastructure, custom built for a government to facilitate data exchange through REST APIs, utilizing some data catalogs and so on. But anyway, we talk about a very local or national level initiative. Besides that, it's good to know that when we think about cities, they also have their data needs. And those ecosystems are also a bit different to those which we seem to have at national level. When in national level we think about data exchange between information systems in the way how X-Road is facilitating it, in the context of smart cities, we see lots of differences, like we have IoT devices, all kind of sensors and devices coming into the game. So the needs for the technical data exchange means may be different from that of the national data exchange layer solution like X-Road. The second level we are witnessing in Europe is the EU's common infrastructure. So we are seeing increasing efforts by the European Union and between the EU member states to build data exchange for cross-border use cases. And the most common building block we have been following is e-delivery, which was known as CEF e-delivery. Nowadays, I think it's also called digital e-delivery. So e-delivery is EU building block aimed for cross-border data exchange, and it is also utilized in the EU-wide once-only technical system and also in the procedures mentioned in the Single Digital Gateway Act. So e-delivery has its de facto role in data exchange in Europe, and usually the projects in which e-delivery is utilized are quite wide. So those projects can actually have, like, let's say, 20+ countries participating. And it means that those use cases are strong. And in every cross-border use case that we have been witnessing at NICE, we have noticed that always if it is something which is done by EU, it's actually becoming a bit easier because we have a common ground, we have common legislation, we have common understanding of what we mean with trust within that project, and facilitation of the use case is only becoming easier. It may sound surprising, but for some reason, when data exchange is facilitated cross-border bilaterally between the countries, there might be even a bigger need for different negotiations, agreements, legal analysis, and whatever is needed, compared to cases when we actually decide at the EU level that let's do it together, and this is the way how we implement it. So the EU-wide infrastructure is having its own nature, and it is a bit different from the one that we see at the national or regional level. We also have a third emerging layer. I think this has become more and more discussed in the past years. Data spaces are changing the landscape. If we think about the national data exchange layers, if we think about X-Road, in X-Road we are currently having our custom protocol stack and we are having our custom ways of exchanging data. Similarly, in some of the API-based ecosystems in Europe, the related technologies and procedures might be very local, not adopted by a huge community around the world. Instead, with X-Road, we at least see that we have a huge community around the world, and that's bringing a big plus to X-Road. We have a big group of countries that have agreed on some principles. But looking into data spaces, I would say that data spaces are even more bringing different organizations together. Those are bringing public and private sector together and allowing for multiple ways of how to exchange data. On what kind of conditions, in what kind of circumstances the data exchange is facilitated. The data spaces are bringing more flexibility and more options for how to do it. And in my opinion, data spaces have been sort of overriding some of the previous discussion. And data spaces seem to be a thing which is really paving the way in Europe. And it's something that we have to consider also at NICE while we are developing X-Road further. So we just cannot say that let's keep our own way going and not react, but we actually have to understand the role of data spaces and consider if X-Road should be changed in the future more towards that direction. The challenge with data spaces currently is that we have some organizations working on data spaces which are very actively discussing how the future data spaces should be. Anyway, we don't have a full consensus yet. What is the common sort of de facto standard for data spaces in Europe? Some might argue that there is a consensus, but if we look overall what is happening, it's still an ongoing discussion. To mention some of the initiatives we are seeing that really impact the field, I first of all have to pick Gaia X, which is probably the most known initiative in Europe and the broadest initiative by its number of participants and its geographical focus. So that is all over Europe and even outside Europe, and it's a strong initiative which is really showing the way how Europe in the future could utilize data spaces. Nice has been a member of Gaia X since its second year, and we have been following those developments closely. And we understand well the challenges related to data spaces, which are not only technical, but also political, organizational, legal, and so on. We have plenty of areas in which the consensus is just building up in Europe. But in the best case, that will be a consensus that really allows us for a new kind of data exchange in Europe in a few years' time. And hopefully also outside of Europe, as we are aware that Europe is not alone, but we have to see what is happening globally. So in Europe, we need certain things for our internal EU internal market needs, public administration needs, but we also have international trade. And the trade is setting requirements what kind of data exchange we should facilitate in Europe to support European businesses and also to allow other businesses to operate in Europe under the European values, regulations, and still, in a way, compliant with that of ours. So to summarize what it means for us, it's necessary to understand multiple ways of exchanging data. Maybe 5 years back, I could be involved in a discussion where someone said that, okay, we are looking into technical solutions A, B, and C. Which of these should we choose so that we get our data exchange need nationally solved? And thinking about those discussions today feels almost absurd. It is no longer the reality. You don't find one tool which fits for all. You need something for your local needs, something for your cross-border needs, and finally data spaces might be a way of combining some of that. But still, I do not believe in any solution which is said to replace all that you have. And besides connecting information systems and understanding how we build the ecosystems, we still have to understand that we are going to live in Europe where we have several parallel ecosystems that should be interoperable. How do we make ecosystems interoperable? We have to seek for common building blocks and components which are commonly agreed to be utilized widely in Europe and elsewhere. We have to look into what kind of communities we have around the world building these solutions, and we have to be part of that discussion as Nice. So for the future, we have to consider how we can adjust our doings into the right direction, and how to find that right direction is a long process. This is an illustration showing how we are considering this future landscape looks like, and not only future because it's actually reality also today. When we go and discuss X-Road anywhere in the world, it's very typical that the discussion is going towards technology. In a few minutes' time, everyone is talking technology, and I'm usually trying to explain that what X-Road is providing is its unique ecosystem model and the tools it provides for facilitating a data ecosystem nationally. So technology is not the thing that we should start with. We have a technology stack which is available for any of our solutions. We can always build on new technologies, and when you build on one technology, the next day there is a new one, and you have someone arguing that your technology selection is old. The more important thing is to understand these layers, that we have local systems, like we can talk about X-Road, we can talk about API-based ecosystem solutions, we can talk about national ones only technical system. That's kind of the ground for your national interoperability. On top of that, we see the cross-border use cases which could utilize X-Road Trust Federation. Those typically utilize e-delivery, even in extending number of cases in Europe. And one's only technical system at European level, which is actually based on e-delivery as well. Going up from that level, we recognize data spaces, and data spaces are increasing actually everywhere in the world, and we can see that it's contributing mostly to the global interoperability besides the two levels. So covering all of these national, European, and global interoperability is increasing the need for specific standards and ideas on how we can actually make it all work. On top of that, we can see a level of, let's say, fully global interoperability. When we usually talk about payment systems, we could talk about some healthcare solutions like international COVID passport, which was planned during the pandemic, aviation interoperability like air traffic control systems, military interoperability, and so on. So world is full of different types of interoperability solutions, data exchange solutions, which operate on multiple different layers. And besides these layers, we have these national, European, and global needs, what we recognize from NIS and its members' perspectives. This is how I assume it will remain, and the question is how can we best adapt into it in all of these different solutions, including X-Road. So I wanted to start today by giving you one food for thought in the beginning, which is about X-Road's future and its role and how we are going to change it in the future, if at all. So my question to all of you today is, could X-Road maintain its best, which is the ecosystem model, which is really strong? X-Road security has been proven. That's also definitely a strength. But could we consider the future X-Road to be actually based on data space infrastructure that would be more interoperable or compliant with other initiatives around the world? I'm not going to jump any deeper into this specific topic and to reveal you any of our future fantasies on X-Road, but I'm leaving part of this to Petteri, my colleague, to present today, who is also here at the studio. So you will hear about X-Road's future plans, possible roadmap alternatives, and that kind of stuff later. But based on what I presented, I hope it is obvious that my message is clear for everyone about X-Road and its future. X-Road is the strongest solution we have identified in the market for facilitating data exchange at national or regional level. Besides that, X-Road's Trust Federation is still unique. Trust Federation meaning the capability of connecting two X-Road ecosystems with each other. It is something really unique, and we have seen several use cases when Trust Federation has been considered also within a country in the federal context. To work between two states within a country. And that's also very unique that you can actually build on the same product, being prepared to connect your different states and your different organizations by utilizing one ecosystem solution in different locations. That's a very unique strength of X-Road. So, ecosystem model and security to remain. And if we consider the future, we also see plenty of other topics ahead. It's not only about the data space question, but we also think about X-Road sustainability. And later today, we will have a separate session on X-Road sustainability and discuss a little bit what it means for us and what has been made so far in that field. We are also continuing efforts to getting more value from the data in X-Road ecosystems, meaning especially the operational data. How we could actually get the operational environmental data of X-Road in a way which allows X-Road users around the world to build better services, to operate their systems better, and allows us at NIS as X-Road's developer to gain more valuable information about how X-Road is used and how it is deployed technically around the world. That's information which is important for X-Road's future roadmap. So that's first about the future of X-Road, and we will hear lots of interesting presentations today complementing this story. And we are happy to answer your questions now today here at the event and also later on. So always feel free to reach out to all of the NIS team members. We are happy to discuss with you. You are most welcome to join the X-Road community. It's open for anyone. If you don't happen to be in the community Slack yet, please make your way there because we are happy to discuss any of your X-Road ideas further. So that's all from my presentation. Welcome once more, and I hope you will enjoy the day. Thank you.
So this was great, Ville, again, and I will reach out to you right now. You encouraged us to reach out, and I will do it right now. Yeah. We have received a couple of questions already from the audience as well, but I want to ask one question, especially from my side as well. Yes. Like I said before, I have introducing this solution all around the world to a lot of different governments, and sometimes they come up with excuses saying, we can't do that because of this or that. What would you say, especially, what are the most common things that governments have told you that we can't do or implement X-Road, but actually have turned out to be a wrong, I wouldn't say wrong information, but just assumption that it wasn't actually true. It wasn't stopping them, but it was stopping them in the head.
Well, you actually touched a very important point here, because when we discuss with different governments, the most common challenge we are facing is that they find it somehow difficult and they start doing it in a too complex way, I mean, governments, instead of trying out things, might start the project to write a report of 200 pages, analyzing X-Road technically, going into its repository, looking into use cases. So the question about X-Road or any other similar solution is made too difficult. That's usually maybe the most common challenge or kind of thing. And as you described, like, how the governments are approaching it, they find also things what cannot be done. And why they find it, because they approach by analyzing the current state and not the future state. And our message usually is, if you want to succeed with X-Road, try it. Make a small proof of concept, not a huge one, just a little proof of concept, and it will tell you more than 200 pages of paper. Unfortunately, I have met with many governments with 200 pages of paper, and I really recommend to change the direction, and instead of that, to implement the proof of concept. It will answer most of the questions.
It's the same here. I've met these governments as well with a lot of analysis done already and saying, okay, we can't do that. I just came back from Canada a couple of days ago, and we were discussing about X-Road also very widely there. And especially the struggle that a lot of governments, including also Canada, has, that there's also not really a big trust between like different kind of public institutions either. And when it comes to, I would say, one of the most unique things about the Estonian e-governance system as well, that we only ask people information like once only. I think X-Road is also actually the basis that we can do it, because we can change this information. What would you say about the trust aspect there? Because a lot of institutions are like, okay, do you think it's going to work? Do you think it's safe? Actually, do you exchange information between different platforms and do it this way? Like, I think you get a lot of questions about also the trust aspect there. What will be your answer when it comes to especially building the transparency and trust between like institutions and exchanging information?
Yeah, well, the trust and security questions are very common, and what is like our interpretation of the situation is that we feel that first of all, X-Road's community is increasing its security. That's one basis. It's a common joint solution of many countries contributing somehow into the project. I think X-Road's security is also proven. That's the second thing we usually say. It's proven. We have seen it in operation for so many years that it really can be trusted, and it has been proven in practice, which is not very common. Some governments who have been considering some, let's say, solutions available in the market, which might be commercial, might be SaaS solutions, might be products like some enterprise service buses and similar ones, which are not equivalent to X-Road. But anyway, well, you might have a kind of track record of the security, but how much of that security is in your own hands? So that's why we also say that open source nature of X-Road is important, because the open source model lets you have it in your own hands. You can always make it sure that you control your own data exchange platform. It's not falling into a vendor login, and you are not getting into any kind of trouble with that.
And I especially think both from the citizens' perspective, customers' perspective, and also the state institutions' perspective, I mean, the less information you have to store, the better it is. If you want to provide your service and you actually store very little information in your system and you just exchange this with other platforms, it's actually also making everything much more secure in a way. Because especially when it comes to myself, like my citizens' perspective, knowing that there is no duplicated information anywhere, but they're just exchanging this and doing it in a very secure way, I sleep much better, I gotta say.
Yeah, the distributed architecture of X-Road is strong. It's definitely strong. And it's not only about the citizen trust, but it's also about the ecosystem's resiliency. So it has the both sides included. So based on our experience with X-Road, we can say that the model is still strong. We trust in its architecture, in its distributed model, and we trust in the ways how security is currently implemented in X-Road to a very high extent.
All right, let's take some of the questions also that we have received from our audience already. And I encourage everybody, it's your chance to ask questions from our wonderful experts here. I'm going to take the first one, which is written here as well. Have you recognized any similar solutions through the years you worked with X-Road? Is there anything else that is very similar in the market also?
Well, yes, we have recognized some similar solutions, and we have increasingly recognized solutions being built which are related to data spaces. Besides that, quite many governments have actually built something of their own. They have typically built something based on REST APIs and a service catalog and some common API models which they deploy throughout the government. But the main difference is that these solutions we are aware of usually lack the strength of the X-Road's ecosystem management model. So they might have technically everything in place and they might have a service catalog, but when it comes to operating the ecosystem and maintaining the processes, that's a part which is fully lacking. And in some of the discussions, the challenge has been that when I have tried to explain what it means, the person I'm discussing with probably doesn't even understand this part of X-Road because it's not very well visible. If you don't deep dive into X-Road and get to know its ecosystem model, it's very difficult to get the first impression of what it really means. So that has been a challenge in explaining it. And of course, in the market, we are aware of unified exchange platform UXP by Cybernetica, our X-Road technology partner as well, by the way. Cybernetica's solution is similar to X-Road based on the same prototype, so it shares many of the characteristics, but the difference is that it is a proprietary software where X-Road is an open source software, so those two are also quite different.
All right. I still want to take one of the questions. We have around 1 minute to go. What's going on in Europe seems to be getting foregrounded in this year's X-Road event. Does it signify a shift in terms of central X-Road in East to Europe, or does it signify that the X-Road shifting from leading development to following an European agenda?
This is a very good question. I would say that our goal has never been to follow European agenda, so that's first thing what is very clear. Our goal has been for some years already that we are actually part of the discussion and we are one who is also participating in defining that agenda, and we want to be proactive and proactively discuss in Europe what are our needs. And we believe in cooperation, and we do not believe that there is any agenda made by any small group, but we really believe that it has to be cooperation cross-border involving several organizations joining their forces and finding ways to deploy.
All right, thank you very much, Ville. We will actually talk with you also a little later in our panel discussion.
Thank you.